remember.
Garfield is a daily newspaper comic strip starring the iconic orange cat of the same name, as well as his owner, John Arbuckle.
Okay. John and Garfield. Do you know of
Relatable,
Garfield's scan?
surly, and adorable, Garfield was based off the childhood memories of his creator.
We all hate Mondays,
Jim
right?
Davis.
We all hate Mondays. That looks like a Cthulhu cat. Okay, cool.
Met this lasagna-loving rascal.
He's not lying. The
Garfield has
lasagna
become a global
is good.
Phenomenon, with
Lasagna is
yearly
good.
Merchandising sales at an estimated.
The world is going to end.
I'm gonna have nightmares now. Like, this is fucking scary.
I've been covering fandoms for a little while now, and what I enjoy about doing this is how when you stare at a fandom long enough, you begin to get this very distorted yet very honest reflection of its source material.
Okay, we got some Sonic.
The descent of Sonic, the magnitude of Undertale. But then
I heard Undertale was really good. I wonder if I should play
I
it.
say what Garfield has become on the internet is the most bizarre fandom I've ever encountered. And I'm not even talking about Garfield porn here.
Oh, okay.
Yes, there is
Garfield
totally that
Rule
as well.
34.
And yes, I did have to fuck up my Google Analytics to find these. No,
MC
I'm talking
Pink
about these
Zero,
far
welcome. Thanks for the
more
follow.
Bizarre. Which,
Welcome to the
if you're
stream.
unaware
I don't know if
of,
maybe you're
to
from
give you a
Discord, but if you're not, welcome to the King's Court.
Alzheimer's
Welcome
group
to the
is
royal
a
family. Hey,
subreddit
how's it going?
Of 50,000 people reposting the same Garfield comic over and over and over. Each member role-playing like this is the first time they've seen it. Relax, John is an 8-part animated series in which a morbidly depressed John Arbuckle is dragged into a frightening alternate reality as he is subsumed by a demonic Garfield. I'm sorry, John.
Oh, how do
Actually,
I pause
Jesus.
this? Okay, that's how I pause it. So that's exactly how I feel and look every time that I am getting ready to go to work, or it's my day off and my boss calls me. You pick up the phone and it's just horror and dread inside of your body, and that's just what you feel.
Oh, we're not ready for I'm sorry, John. But maybe in like an hour. And maybe you've noticed the runtime for this video and are asking, how could I possibly spend
There's
this
so much
time
cursed
on an
imagery
idea
here
that the subtle lowering of my father's eyebrows as I explained it to him, communicated to me, was something he considered a profound waste of time.
Like, do you guys ever have anything that you explain to like the normies or like to your parents? Got lots depending on what you're into. Just shoot me something. I know this one's gonna be about an hour long.
Garfield. God, I hope it's worth it. But the answer is
Yeah.
I have looked deep into Garfield and I have seen things horrible, frightening, and beautiful, including what is to me,
I don't know if you can link it here,
the greatest piece of fan art ever created.
Back into the story, we are about to see the most blessed, cursed image we have ever seen on the internet. And I've seen a lot. I remember dial-up. I remember when we had to go out and play outside and drinking from a garden hose because we weren't allowed inside, and we never came back until the streetlights came on. So I've seen a lot on the internet, a whole lot. It's often like war veterans that come back with PTSD. I feel like I understand their plight, though it's not quite the same. It is very, very similar.
Would like to show it all to you. So join me on this long and strange journey as we take our first step and ask a question. How the fuck did we get here from a cartoon cat who likes lasagna?
Sure.
Or,
how did we?
Put it another way, what is Garfield? So, I want to be honest here in that unlike the other fandoms I've covered for this channel, I've never really been that into Garfield.
Yeah, I've never really been into Garfield very much either. It's just like,
no,
okay,
no,
it's okay.
No, I'm not. Doing this, I do not need to humiliate myself
Chambers,
for
Minecraft,
your
1.21.
amusement. That's not to
Okay.
say I dislike Garfield, just that I was never really into him as a kid, and that hadn't changed up until this video. And so my first call was to go looking for articles on the appeal of Garfield. But what I found was kind of the opposite. Multiple headlines and videos about how Garfield
isn't
not
funny and never was
even
supposed to
was
be.
never
Okay.
meant to be. How Jim Davis is a marketing man first, and the comic was just intended as a vessel to sell merchandise.
Okay.
And after reading a
Get my hand off
lot
my face.
of Garfield,
I don't know why I'm touching my face so
trust me,
much.
I read a lot of Garfield. I actually
A lot of Garfield
disagree.
lore,
I think this is a
apparently.
fairly cynical mischaracterization of Jim Davis and can be traced back to a single quote he gave 40 years ago and is not really
Conscious effort to
reflective
come
of
up with
the
a good
dude
marketable
whom I've
character.
watched and
Okay, I
read
mean, that's fair. An
many,
orange cat.
many interviews.
Everybody
Who is the
knows
kind
that
of
orange
person who
cats are the
still
weird
talks
cats of the cat
about
world,
wanting to
much
make
like
the whole
orange-haired
world laugh
children.
with a simple joke. But if I'm right about this, then
So they have
why
that in common.
do so many people find Garfield unfunny? And that being the case, how has it survived for 40 years? I'm about to be very generous with my interpretation of Garfield.
Okay,
But I think
my
it's important to
prediction on how it's lasted this long is it was like one of the original comic strips that I know of. It's been a long time since I've even seen a newspaper, to be honest, because you just get your news online. But I'm going to say there was some type of binding contract between the creator and the major newspaper outlets that was a hell of a contract. And he's just had to be like, they have to produce Garfield.
do that because we need to understand the appeal here. And while I am not going to
And everybody knows that
defend
Odie
the
is
comedy
the
in
best Garfield
as we
character.
shall see later, I find 0.104% of Garfield comics funny. I
Yeah.
do think
Yeah, they're not really that
it's
funny.
worth
I
looking
think
at
they're
the
just something to be,
reasons
like,
why
entertained
Garfield's
with.
humor gets such a polarizing reaction from people. Jim Davis's previous comic before Garfield was Norm the Gnat, which ended in 1975.
Hi there, my name is
He
Freddy the
then
Fruit
spent
Fly.
3
The
years
lifespan
doing,
of the fruit
well,
fly is about 1 week.
nothing
I'd like to stop, and I couldn't read that fast enough. But okay, there we go. But I really haven't the time. Oh, that's fair. They don't have the time to chat because they're dying, like we all are. That's good to know.
The one before that,
Welcome
or the
to,
one before that, or the one before that, or the one before
apathy.
that, but the one before that. Barring the old gods of media like Mickey Mouse and Peanuts, Garfield has been around longer than practically any relevant character in pop culture today. And you can imagine this lazy, rude, anti-authority cat being
I achieved
little more
exasperation,
outrageous in the late 70s
exasperating,
than he
and
is
I've
today.
achieved
In the same way, The
okay,
Simpsons
I
and
can't
Sonic the
read.
Hedgehog would have
I cannot
seemed
read.
wild and
That's
countercultural in
maybe
their
that's
day
why I don't
before
like
it's slowly
comics.
becoming mainstream. That's exactly what happened to Garfield. We are just not old enough to remember it.
Sure.
And Jim Davis has even talked about this in interviews. That said, I don't think the appeal of Garfield is its humor. I think it's Garfield. And what I mean by this is that we all want to be Garfield. Please click off the video.
I don't know about that. I don't know if I want to be Garfield. I think there is an appeal to the time of nostalgia because this cartoon was created a while ago. I can't give you the exact year that it was created because I don't know. However, I do know that there are funnier cartoon strips out there. Crap, what is the other cat? I cannot remember the name of it off the top of my head. But his cat is always like, meow, meow, feed me. And he would just like beat up his owner and do mean things to his owner in order for him to get fed. However, I feel like maybe people feel similar to the way they feel about Star Wars to Garfield. I had never seen Star Wars as a kid. I didn't grow up on it. It just wasn't my thing. Futuristic sci-fi fantasy was not my thing. Ati's crazy form music video. Yeah, I don't see why not. This one is going to be a long video, but I should be able to get to it. Oh. That's not good. Testing. Can you guys hear me? I would really have hated to been talking this whole time. Okay, cool. Yeah, okay. So I'm not sure what the hang up there is, but hopefully that gets resolved. But back to where I was at, Star Wars. Didn't see it, didn't watch it growing up. Tried to watch it, I just couldn't. I could not get into it, and I think a lot of what it is the time that the kids grew up with it is, it's nostalgic for them, so Star Wars is comforting for them, whereas I had never seen it, so I had no emotional attachment to it, so I can say that I didn't think it was that great. There are things that I do have a nostalgic attachment to, like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon, that in all reality, like the American version of Yu-Gi-Oh! Sucked. It was not good, but I loved it because I grew up with it. So maybe that's what people think about Garfield. I definitely don't want to be him, though. If I was a furry, I would definitely be some type of liger or a dragon, maybe. But I'm not sure dragons count as furries because technically they're scaled creatures.
I promise I have a point to make here. Think of everything.
But
you
Mario
consider
Party
imperfect
slaps,
about
right?
yourself.
Like,
physical,
just
mental,
fun.
emotional.
For me, it
whatever,
was like
any
GoldenEye,
perceived
Super
flaw
Smash
that makes
Brothers.
you feel shame. Now, imagine an alternate version of yourself where those flaws still existed, but you just accepted them. You are in perfect harmony with who and what you are, and that's it. And well, that's Garfield. Garfield is lazy, he's gluttonous, he's selfish, and people constantly make fun of him for being
Dragons
fat.
are a part of the furry community, but they are a part of what's known as scalies. Okay. I got what you said. I got what you meant. Good to know, though.
Flaws are other people's problems, not his. And that is some seriously aspirational levels of confidence. But the real genius of the character is he also has all these little traits that allow us to see ourselves in him.
Sure.
Garfield hates Mondays. He
We all
likes
do.
coffee. He loves lasagna.
I don't like coffee very much. Lasagna's good. Spiders are okay.
Authority. These are all very general, but what that means is that no matter who you are, there's probably something in Garfield you're going to be able to relate to. And that relatability, combined with his more
I do
aspirational
enjoy
quality,
a
creates this
lazy
simple
nap on the
but
couch.
massively
So I
appealing
get it.
cocktail of
I
a
get it.
character. And I think it's the strength of that appeal that's let Garfield survive for 40 years.
Okay.
And I just want to note here that for as
See, it's cute, though. It's a
messed
cute
up
little kitty,
as
though.
things are going to get this video, there is a lot of
what?
really cool and wholesome Garfield fan art from people who just earnestly
Okay.
enjoy Garfield's comic and his world. One standout
Apparently there
being
is
the
Garfield
fan comic
Girl.
John,
Had no idea.
which tells the story of an older John Arbuckle rediscovering his love of art and cartooning, and it's just this super cute and endearing take on these characters. Now, granted, you don't have to spend that long
He's
looking at
jacked,
Garfield
bro.
fan
Garfield
art on
is
the internet
jacked.
before things start to get strange, like Garfamon, a blog in
Garfamon,
which
okay.
one intrepid Garfield artist has been redrawing the entirety
I wonder
of
which
Pokemon
one is the
as
coolest looking
Garfield, and I
Garfamon.
don't know how many there are because my
The wheel
browser
looks kinda
crashes
cool.
before I hit Gen 1. But what I think's really interesting about Garfamon is it
Is that
shows
like a
how
Odie Garfield? I
iconic
like it.
and
I like it.
malleable Garfield's visual design is. Meaning Garfield's visual design is recognizable
Dude,
enough
that
to
Garfield
be twisted
seahorse
into
looks crazy.
basically anything and still read as
Or
Garfield.
Horsia.
This will become horrifyingly relevant later. But it's not just Garfield's character design that applies to, but also the comic itself. Garfield's comic was a big part of his spread, designed to be as simple, timeless, and consumable as possible.
Dick, stop clawing
Each
the
one is
waterbed.
entirely
That's
self-contained and rarely, if
that's what I get told all the time. Dick, stop clawing the waterbed. I'm sorry if there are any underage children watching this.
ever touches off current
I just soaked my
events.
feet in your
And
water dish.
Since even the early days of the internet and social media, people have been taking these comics and changing them. Something that's possible because of how simple a formula they work off, with each comic following the same three-panel structure.
If you insist,
The
I'll
first panel
stay, and then he
establishes
gets
the
out.
scenario. It is the morning.
Good morning,
and John
Garfield.
Garfield have just woken up. The second panel is the setup.
Good morning.
Garfield is in an unusually
Okay, that's a
good
cheery mood.
And the third panel, the punchline. Garfield is in a good mood because he drinks too much coffee.
Okay.
With the exception of the longer Sunday comics, this
Only
is
11
how
cups of
Garfield
coffee. I
works.
feel like
And just the
Garfield
character
might be my
himself,
wife.
that simplicity was critical in letting as wide an audience as possible
Don't tell her I said that,
understand
please.
and enjoy Garfield. But it's also that simplicity that made the comic so
What's up,
infinitely
that one
memeable.
BF?
It is
But-
shockingly
buff-
easy to make your own
but if-
Garfield
buff-
comic
buff- diff-
from
I
splicing
can't.
together different establishments.
It's not working.
setup,
I feel like I'm
and
having a
punchline
stroke
panels.
every time
You
I
can
try
this
to
yourself
pronounce
with the
your
random
username.
Garfield comic generators, and it's that malleability that's
What is
led
this-
to
what is the story
scores of
behind it?
Popular online
Welcome to the
trends,
stream.
such as replacing the last panel of a Garfield comic with an image of Garfield smoking a pipe, and an unusual amount of these still work. But my personal favorite is the same, except the final panel now being Garfield being flung from a window. However, in time, people also got much weirder than that. For example, silent movie Garfield. Garfield with one extra beat panel.
That's a nice suit.
Garfish. Garfield with
Garfish.
pixel art from that
Okay.
one really bad Garfield game that never released outside Japan.
I did not know there was a Garfield game.
but the drawing keeps getting lazier.
BFDI.
Multiple choice Garfield. Garfield,
BFDI.
except all the
BFDI.
comics from 1978. are
BFDI.
color
What does
averaged
BFDI
together.
stand for?
Real life Garfield. Uncomfortably close Garfield. Garfield evolves into noise. Two Garfields. Polarized Garfields, you get the idea. So
Sure,
Garfield
there's a lot
is
of
this
different
iconic,
variations
appealing
of
character
Garfield.
communicated through this simple but infinitely
Battle for
consumable
Dream
and
Island is-
recreatable medium.
what is
And I
that?
think this does go away in helping us understand
There's also
the
a racing game
existence
with
of
Garfield?
something like or/Alzheimer's.
I think you're
Well, there is
mistaking.
something
What's that?
undeniably cruel
crap.
about this
The
subreddit.
Mario.
I'd be lying if I said
Is
I
it
didn't
Tanuki?
think there wasn't something
Tuki?
interesting
Tanuki
and even a little
skin for
poetic
Garfield?
here. The idea that someone's final tether to their own reality is something as simple but recognizable as a Garfield comic strip, and the tragedy of when even that too starts to fade.
I wonder if
However,
that's what a
this
crazy
still
person
doesn't take us
sees.
any closer to understanding why Garfield on the internet is so, you know. And I think a real easy answer
know.
here
I
is
don't
it's
know.
just the absurdity of making such depraved art out of something so simple and everyday. But as
Okay, it's like
you
a statement
may be
about
able to
like
tell
our
from the
society.
remaining runtime on this video,
Dude, what?
I disagree.
That is
I think
so
there's
many
genuinely
edits.
something darker and stranger at play here.
I would cry. Could you
And
imagine
I'm
editing
not
that
even
much, not
talking
saving,
about
and
the
then it
official
all
Garfield's
crashing?
Very occasional
Crashing? Did I say
descent
crashing?
into something
Crashing.
weirder.
Crashing.
I'm talking about a darkness that lies at the heart of every Garfield comic strip. And to start to
Is it
unravel
laziness?
what that is,
Is it apathy?
I want to talk
Is it the
about
7 deadly
28th
sins?
of January 2008, when
2008. Okay.
27 very strange Garfield-themed videos all simultaneously appeared.
I don't remember
on a
this.
Previously unknown YouTube channel.
I don't know
Kind
this.
of
I don't remember this, and I don't
incredible
like
thing about
this.
Lasagna Cat now is how weirdly ahead of its time it was. This was 2008, and the term meme was still years away from becoming something people actually said.
Okay.
And yet, Lasagna Cat made memes of Garfield comics, but then became memes of
I
themselves
don't like
before
that.
you had even
I really
finished
don't.
watching the
I
video.
feel like that's some type of
And
like
what I mean
fetish.
by this is that each video of Lasagna Cat is broken into 3 sections. The first is a live-action recreation of a Garfield comic. The second, the actual comic.
What happened to his
on
hair?
which
He's
the
having a
section
midlife
was
crisis
based.
over his hair.
And the third, and by far strangest section, would take the footage of section 1 and change it. So this would become this. Music video parodies, video game
okay.
references, 2008 internet humor. Lasagna Cat was taking Garfield comics and contorting them
I get
into
excited
all
about toast
kinds
too.
of
I
strange
think toast
things,
is some
but
of the best
tantalizingly, underneath
bread.
the sheer wackiness of it all, there was what felt like a very subtle disdain towards
realizes
Garfield.
another person is
There was
accidentally
something
falling
a
into the
little
trap because of my
grotesque
username.
and
Well, crap.
uncanny
I'm not.
about
What
these
is
shrunken
Battle
actors
for
with their
Dream
sagging
Island?
costumes
Is that like
and
a Legend of
human
Zelda?
hands. Each skit ending with the same canned drone laughter.
No,
that
I'm thinking
really
Breath of the Wild.
highlighted
Never
the
mind. I'm sorry.
mundanity
I
of
haven't
these
played video games in a
jokes.
long time.
Garfield, this is a diagram of the food chain.
Okay.
You're here,
Sure.
and that's a mouse down there.
Okay.
Any questions?
Wait, who's at
Where's
the top?
pizza?
I was thinking it was an
But the
object
strangest
show
part
thing.
was how each video ended on a bizarre tribute to Jim
An object show
Davis. This is one of the first really unusual things I noticed about the Garfield fandom. It has this kind of feverish obsession with Garfield's creator.
I know
Jim
there was that
Davis.
show, like
And I say unusual because in every other fandom I've covered,
Total Drama Island,
I don't
where
know
they
if
and
I
then like they
remember a
fought for
single
stuff,
instance
but I
of
don't
the
know anything
creator of
about
those properties
Dream
ever
Island.
appearing in fan
I'm
works.
so, I
But
apologize for my
Garfield
ignorance. I am
is different.
stupid.
Over and over,
Oh, that's a lot of
Davis
teeth right
kept
there.
materializing
It's a
in
lot of
fan
teeth.
works, often in very strange ways. And to the best of my knowledge, Lasagna
Smite the
Cat
non-believers,
was the
Jim.
First instance of
Smite the
sadness.
non-believers.
So, why? Well, if that was a question you asked in 2008, you'd be waiting a long time for an answer.
Okay.
After the initial upload day of Lasagna Cat, the channel would go silent. Days would become weeks. Weeks
I wonder
would
if this is
become
still
months,
like a
and
channel on
months
YouTube
would
that you can
become
search.
years. And without a single
sure it is.
update, Lasagna Cat began to fade
Drinks the
into
non-believers.
internet obscurity.
Is that a reference to
Which
Jim
is
Jones
why
drinking the
it
Kool-Aid?
was such a shock when a full 9 years later, a
like
new
it. I
video
like it. I think it is.
appeared on the Lasagna Cat channel, ending with the text, "Telephone Sex Survey, February 9th,
Okay.
2017.
This
was the beginning of a
I don't know
strange
anybody
rabbit
who would
hole of videos
call a
led 2 weeks
hotline
later
and take
to
part of
a
a survey, you know?
bizarrely high production trailer that claimed if you called a toll-free number and
Okay.
left your name and the number of sexual partners you'd had, a Garfield web series would return. 2 weeks later, and boom. Just like they had 9
I wonder
years
how
ago,
many
11
people
new
actually
videos
called
were
that and said
simultaneously
0.
uploaded to Lasagna Cat. And while they were similar in format to the old videos, they were also so different. The first of the new videos begins as any typical Lasagna Cat would, parodying an old comic where Garfield steals John's pipe. But what's waiting for us at the end of the video isn't a
Don't worry, I think we're all
reslicing of the
immature in
footage
here.
from section 1
Scan
that
might
we
not be.
used to,
Scan's pretty mature.
but a
Me, on the other
man
hand, I'm
claiming
so
that this
freaking immature, it's not even funny.
Garfield comic transformed his entire existence as he obsessively analyzes every tiny part of the comic in excruciating
Yes, you're
detail. His
1000%
examination
mature.
gradually expanding outward to the immortal nature of art and mimetic culture and its ability to transcend humanity and even the laws of space and time. And this goes
That's not too
on
hard to break the
for
fourth-
an
fourth
entire
dimensional
hour,
wall.
and it might just be the best video on the internet. And somehow this was just the beginning.
Okay.
Whereas the original
We got
end of
Rap
video
Cat
skits
remade.
had that charming amateur with a green screen feel. What waited for us in the third act of these videos now were shockingly high
Bro,
production.
you can't
short
just
films
knock the
that
cupcakes on the
transformed
ground. That's good
simple
food.
Garfield comics into these
I'm fat. I like
elaborate,
cupcakes.
surreal stories. Jokes about Odie getting a bag stuck on his head morphed into these strange tales of the
that
bag-headed
Pierce
Odie
Morgan?
becoming a fashion icon before taking his own life and being condemned by Garfield to a hell filled with demonic John Arbuckle chimeras. Gags where John uses the wrong shampoo would now be mutated
Red Velvet
into,
sucks, though. That's okay.
well,
What?
this is what
I don't know I don't know what's going on. But I feel like I need an adult, one that's more adultier than I am, because there is John Arbuckle getting bukkakied on by a bunch of Japanese men. That's not something that I thought I would see today.
They would turn into, and I don't want to describe this. Those simple Garfield jokes were now being contorted
Don't worry, I
to the
described it for
bizarrest
you.
of extremes, contrasting the arguable mundanity of the original with this just wild insanity. And even more pronounced this time was that subtle malice towards Garfield. Each video still ending on those bizarre tributes.
You're excited,
to
concerned?
Jim Davis. But it's
I think
only in the
maybe that's
final
no,
video
alarmed
ever
would not
uploaded
be
to the
excited.
channel
Maybe,
that
because
Lasagna
excited doesn't
Cat
always have
would
to mean
reveal what
happy.
it truly was. And that video was called Sex Survey Results.
Okay.
Sex Survey Results begins with John Arbuckle entering his living room and sitting down to read the paper. But he hears a knock.
Telephone
at his
scam
door,
charged with gross
and
privacy violation. That's fair. Yeah,
"Who's
that makes
there?"
sense to
To
me.
which he answers, revealing a strange white mannequin. The mannequin giving its
Straight white
name
male?
and number of sexual partners.
Hey, my name's Garrett Smith, and I have had exactly 0 sex partners.
That's one
Before the
person
scene
saying
freeze
0.
frames and pulls out to reveal a near identical scene, and we begin again, but now with Garfield instead of John. The same events play out, only with a new piece of audio detailing someone else's name and number of sexual
At
partners.
3.
And we
Okay,
cycle
hey,
again,
he's
but
getting it
now
in.
with Odie.
He's getting it in.
And
A little
then
bit of
again,
horror, but
back to
getting it
John,
in.
And then again, and again, and again, and again, and again. And this continues for nearly
Kate Mini 5. Okay.
hours. All of which I have watched.
guess.
Most of which I did.
Andrew,
live
111,
on stream.
111.
Watching Sex Survey Results in its entirety is exhausting. An exercise in mind-numbing repetition. But I think there's something kind of important in that experience.
What do you think is
You're
important in
listening
this
to all
experience?
these different recordings of people communicating what is, to many, a pretty sensitive piece of information.
Andrew,
and it's
6, okay.
weird and even a little uncomfortable. But soon, you just go
Noah,
numb to it.
too many? Fair.
After
Hey,
an
you know
hour,
what? I guess he's
it stops feeling
putting in that work,
weird, and
breaking
after
them backs out there,
hours,
you know?
It stops feeling like anything, because anything repeated enough times loses all meaning.
Okay.
Not unlike a
Fair.
comic strip running day
Please,
after
please.
day after day.
If that's how you
after
find
day
your source of energy,
day
please eat a battery.
for 40 years.
I'm not
And
saying
it's
to do
at
it,
that point
but
when
if
that feeling is
that's
at
what
strongest and you are completely
electrifies
numb to
you
whatever
or
is happening,
charges
that
you up
lasagna
or
hits
gets you going,
with what has to be
the
one of the
Energizer
most
buddy might
infamous and
be a
shocking
thing.
pieces of footage.
Chalky
that is
milk
allowed
sounds
to
delicious right
exist
now.
on YouTube. At this point, the scene has descended into night.
Okay.
The mannequins have begun to take strange and grotesque
Jesus
shapes,
Christ
and
in
John
12.
answers the
Jesus Christ
door
had 12. Okay,
one
I get it.
final
12 apostles.
time,
Okay, that makes sense.
only to be faced with
John Arbuckle.
Uh-huh.
2.
2. What? What? What?
John Arbuckle 0.
and immediately,
fuck's going on?
This second John ages about 30 years.
Okay.
This new, older John Arbuckle now wandering the streets alone, frightened and confused.
Okay, the
finds a
mannequins are
dried
real.
out husk of a cat, which teleports him to a massive ravine, where he encounters a strange naked shaman who attacks him before teleporting behind him. And
This is my
whispering
dream.
Silent words in his ear.
I've always wanted to have silent words
John
whispered into my ear by a naked
collapses
shaman in
into
a ravine.
pile of worms and dirt. The shaman roars, and we hard cut to a young girl screaming in the bathroom of a public school.
She's giving
We're
birth?
given extreme close-ups of her birthing a
Okay.
stillborn child, and she steps back
Oh.
and stares down in horror before saying something in Polish.
To dziecko nie jest moje. To dziecko jest coś z ciemności.
I don't speak Polish,
Ja urodziłam ludzkie przekleństwo.
but this is
She
kind of
leaves, and we
disturbing.
get one final shot of the child, but
Mhm.
now
Mhm.
a ginger cat is perched beside it. We cut, the cat is now gone, and the baby opens its eyes.
Oh, fuck that.
before the
Nope.
screen
I'm not
is
sleeping
filled
tonight.
with a block
That's not
of
happening.
bright orange. Well, that was a nightmare.
The baby, yeah,
But
that's
I actually
that's
think
probably
that
exactly what it
Lasagna
is.
Cat has something really interesting to say.
Mm.
But to get
That was
there,
a little bit,
we're gonna
little
have
bit,
to do
little bit different.
a little legwork.
Kids are
Earlier in this
terrifying
video,
until you
we
have one.
asked,
And then
what
it's the
is-
scariest thing on earth
But
because
now,
you know you're
I
responsible
would
for
like to
raising
ask,
a responsible
what
human being.
is Garfield? Considering I had little history
Clearly
with
he's an
Garfield,
angel.
I knew to answer
He
this,
gave
I
life
would
to a
need
stillborn
immerse
child.
myself in him to understand the comic on an intimate level, and so I committed to reading 400 Garfield comics. But not just that.
That's not a lot.
I wish to study them.
That's not that many.
And so I didn't just read Garfield, I collected data on Garfield. I noted every observation.
Timmy,
I
what's up,
had
brother?
in a
Welcome to the
large
stream,
Google
bud.
Spreadsheet. And through this, I established that Garfield was made up of roughly 11 different kinds of jokes, such as humor derived from the fact that Garfield is lazy / gluttonous.
Sure, that's me.
Absurdist humor, relatable
also me.
humor,
That's me.
other humor, which were either recurring jokes too sporadic for their own category, but mainly jokes about Garfield doing things a cat would do, the joke being that he's a cat, or
Okay.
jokes about Garfield doing things a cat would not do, the joke being he's a cat. These
Sure,
are my least
sure.
favorite kind of Garfield
Sure, that makes
joke.
sense,
I
right?
measured
Because
for
cats
a
don't
variety
do
of
certain
behaviors,
things, and
such as
them
the
being
amount of fourth
doing
wall
those things that they
breaks,
don't normally
which was
do.
4, or instances
quite strange.
of Garfield becoming suicidal, which was 2, or how many times the comic made me laugh, which was precisely once, and it was this one. After many,
I didn't get to
many
read it
hours
fast.
of collecting Garfield data,
It was too
I sought
fast.
to answer a single question that would surely help me understand Garfield, and by extension, Lasagna Cat. What was the most common type of joke in Garfield?
I don't know.
And when I tabulated the results, what I saw shook me. What was I looking at?
Okay, I am assuming that the most common joke in Garfield is going to be something about death, as Garfield is a transitional being that inhabits a world somewhere between light and dark and helps people pass between realms. That's going to be my answer. I'm locking it in now. Do I respect the furry community? You know what? I will say this about the furry community. We've made fun of furries for a long, long time, and they have stuck it out. They've changed a little bit over the years. Technology's got better. You know, you kind of have to respect the hustle. Don't hate the player, hate the game type of thing, you know? Yeah, so that's how we feel about the furry community. To each their own.
This couldn't be possible, and I grew concerned. The 400 comics I had pulled from were a combination of every comic on the Twitter account Random Garfield,
Okay.
which algorithmically pulls 3 random Garfield comics every day.
I know
well
you
as
do.
this YouTube video.
I'm gonna
ranking the
start
top
making you one.
100 Garfield comics. Perhaps this video was a mistake, its author's biases tainting my study.
Sure.
So I proceeded to read 200 more Garfield comics, chosen completely at random from Garfield's web archive. I tallied the numbers again, and no, impossible. This time the results were even more pronounced. Was I subconsciously selecting Garfield comics to affirm my own biases?
Well, I don't know what your
This-
biases would be.
And so I committed to reading an entire
Timmy, are you a
year
furry?
of Garfield, each month being selected from 3 and 4 year intervals across Garfield's 4 decades, bringing my total number of read Garfield comics to 956. I was
956.
struck with an idea. What if I committed
Why not just
to
1,000?
reading every Garfield comic in existence? Then my
That's
data
mad. That's
would
mad,
be
lad.
pure, complete, and indisputable. This is when I
Hey,
encountered
man, whatever
problem
floats your boat,
when I
man. What
sought
kind of furry
out
are you?
the estimated total number of Garfield comics in existence. That number was 14,000. But
240?
how
Okay.
was there that many? This video was already taking far too long, and at this point, I
don't know how he's gonna read
several
14,000,
days reading
but, you know,
Garfield comics,
I
and
think
yet
he can do
somehow
it.
I had
I
only
believe in him.
consumed 6.83% of all Garfields. For not the last time this video, the very concept of Garfield.
You changed
began
ever
to
since
feel
some bad things
gargantuan,
happened, but you're
impossible,
happy now. Oh,
entirely beyond the
okay.
grasp of my feeble mortal consciousness.
Sorry some bad things
I decided
happened.
that reading 14,000 Garfield comics
Dude is
was
going
not
insane.
a realistic goal. I know some of you will consider this a failure.
Okay.
I am sorry.
It's okay.
I read up on sample sizes and learned that my current yield
Don't
of Garfield
forget
comics will leave me
Garfield,
with a
the
margin of
horror
error
fan version.
of about 1.5%, and this
I
is
don't think
considered
Garfield's
acceptable.
canon.
I sigh and proceed forward. I tally the final numbers and rank each strain of Garfield joke from 11 to 1. The results frighten me. I am now going to share this specific breakdown with you because I need you to see
Slender
what I
Tummies?
see.
Never heard of Slender
Before we
Tummies.
begin, I want you to ask yourself a question. What do you think is the most
Are those the
common
things
type
from
of
that
joke
Skibbity
in
toilet?
Garfield? And I want you to hold on to that guess as we proceed down the list.
Shit, I need to
Number
rewind.
11,
I
we have
need to hear what he said. I was too busy reading chat.
see what I see. Before we begin, I want you to ask yourself a question. What do you think is the most common type of joke in Garfield?
It's got to be death.
And
It's
I
got to
want
be
you to
death.
hold on to that
It-
guess as we
it's gotta be.
proceed down the list. At number 11, we have jokes centered around Irma, the local cafe owner, and how
Okay.
she's bad at running her business. These jokes make up just 0.42% of Garfield.
Okay.
Just above that, at number
Good ol'
10,
Irma.
with 0.5%,
That
the
cat
jokes
kinda looks
based
like a
around
penis.
Garfield's girlfriend Arlene.
On the left, the one on the left.
Number 9, with 1%, was humor derived from how much Garfield hates Nermal. At number 8,
Huh?
with 2.3%, is comedy conveying Garfield's hatred of spiders.
Dude,
At number
I'm telling you,
7,
spiders are
with 4.5%,
okay. Spiders are okay.
was relatable humor.
Okay.
This was the first major surprise to me. I had assumed that a cat whose entire branding was built on one simple, relatable quote would have more relatable humor in its
Yeah,
comic.
absolutely. I would
was
too.
wrong, and it wouldn't be the last time.
Is this
Number
gonna be like
6
some
at
cryptic
4.7%
reference
was
to, like,
whimsy derived from Garfield's abuse of Odie.
The
Number
bad
5,
German people?
with 13.7%, was mildly surreal and absurdist humor. At number 4, with 16.8%, are jokes based on Garfield being lazy or gluttonous.
Sure,
And again, for obvious reasons, I was shocked not to see this further up the list.
Yeah, you would
Number
think it'd be like
3,
number 1.
with 17.4%, is other. These are the kinds of jokes I do not like. And at number 2, with 18.8%, is a mystery category that I will reveal much
Okay.
later in the video for dramatic effect.
I feel like we should be
Now,
waiting to reveal
before I
number
unveil
1
number
and not number
one,
2.
I want to stop and ask you again, what do you think is the most common type of joke in Garfield? At
What do you
number
guys
1,
think it is?
and by
What do you guys
far
think it
the
is?
biggest
Before we get into it, what do you guys think is the most common type of joke in Garfield? Maybe it's knock jokes. Do you hate Monday? Is it hate the hatred of Mondays? The very first day of the week, the one that God created the heavens and earth and said, "Let there be light." Is that what you think it is? Monday is the best day, right? That's the best one. I don't read comics either. I don't either. I can't read. That's the problem.
shock on the list was a category I never even would have guessed
Wednesday
existed.
is Wednesday.
And it's called John is Pathetic.
Oh.
John Arbuckle is 30 years old. He
Okay.
lives alone, has no real friends outside his dog and cat,
Okay.
and is constantly lonely.
And he's got a Z for a nose mouth. That's kind of strange. I never thought about this. I never ever thought about the fact that John Arbuckle lives alone with a cat and a dog. There are implications there that he might have proclivity to a certain type of lifestyle as far as gender preferences go. that could be a thing as to why he appears to be single and 30 and, cats and dogs. That's possible. I don't know the story behind John Arbuckle, so I don't want to make the assumption because that would not be very nice of me.
And these are all things that the Garfield comic
that's a bad
takes
day.
joy in
That's a bad day.
ridiculing.
You don't want to drop
A
your
typical
spaghetti.
John is pathetic gag works like this. John says he's not going to call women for dates anymore, that he's going to wait for them to approach him. We see him waiting, and then
Nothing.
we see him waiting what appears to be...
Oh my God, he's an incel. He's an incel. Timmy, thank you for following. I did not know you were not followed. Maybe this is your Twitch account. You know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, I hope your dad's okay, man. I hope everything's going well for you. Why am I always having to beg for dates? I'm going to let the girls call me nothing. And then he just sits there for a long enough time to grow his hair out and his beard out and smell. I don't understand the joke of Dr. Livingston, I presume. So that's something.
Several months later. Jokes like this are very common, not just in how women find John actively repulsive, but in how he is pathetic and should be ridiculed. And you can see this in how the comic portrays his intelligence, his hobbies, his fashion sense, to even his physical strength and inadequacy in anything that could be considered remotely masculine. Across nearly 1,000 comics, I measured 0 cases of John showing any admirable qualities. Meaning, whereas Garfield is something to be aspired to,
there's gotta be some admirable
John
qualities.
is something to be laughed at. Even when John did find a girlfriend in Liz 28 years into Garfield's run, and only after fans begged Jim Davis to end John's loneliness, he's still treated as this pathetic character. And I think there's something kind of sad about that. A person whose only purpose is to be ridiculed and to be trapped
he is the
in
butt
that
of the joke.
existence for 40 years. And where this gets even sadder,
I want to cry
is
for
when you
John
start
right
to
now.
consider the comic from John's perspective.
It was a
Across
pretty
that
good
same
mullet, to be
range of
fair.
comics,
It was.
I measured 156 instances of John displaying some kind of negative emotion or mental anguish.
Oh.
Anger, depression,
He looks
lethargy.
possessed.
But if you're a casual reader of the comics, it might never feel like that. As whenever John does begin to sink into despair, Garfield is there to deliver a witty punchline and diffuse the tension. But here is where we start to get into the very strange
Yeah, Sammy, thank you,
nature
man.
of reality.
Hope your dad's doing good, bud.
Garfield. See, as the audience, as the readers of this comic, we can experience Garfield's thoughts through the visual device of thought bubbles. But critically, this is not the case for John. Across every Garfield comic I read, I didn't record a single instance of John ever directly reacting to Garfield's thoughts in a way that couldn't be explained by him intuiting Garfield's body language and expression. And that information is critical because it means the reality we are experiencing and the one John is experiencing are entirely different. And
Okay.
this brings us to a question. What is it really like being John Arbuckle?
Sounds
On
miserable.
the 13th of
It sounds
February 2008,
miserable.
a Garfield fan comic was uploaded to Tumblr.
Think about this. John's life has been miserable for over 40 years that this comic book goes on. Yet he has not took the final ride. He has not ended the story, so to speak. I think that's something admirable to look at. I think the fact that he hasn't jumped out of the 15th floor is, something admirable that we should look up to. John's a hero.
And it looked just like a regular Garfield comic, but with one critical difference.
Doesn't want to follow
The
right
first
now
panel
because of the loud
depicted
freaking
John
noise
sitting
and is
alone
like
with
really
the
startled
dialogue,
by noise.
I've done things in my
It's okay,
life
I'm startled by
that I
noise too.
regret." The second panel shows nothing, just John, his remorseful silence unbroken. The final panel of the comic punctuated by nothing. Just a slight shift in John's expression.
Just depression,
His regrets
loneliness.
were washing over him. What this was just a regular Garfield strip with one key difference. Garfield had been removed.
Welcome, buddy.
And
Thank
because
you.
of the
Welcome
very
to the
specific
royal
way
family.
John
Thank
and
you for
Garfield
joining the
communicate,
King's Court. Have a
the
seat
comic
at the
still
table.
works, but whereas before Garfield's punchlines could distract us from John's misery, that's no longer the case. And this was the beginning of the bizarre and morbid webcomic Garfield minus Garfield, which lets us experience the true crushing reality of John. And some of these comics are really
The heart
haunting.
starts to hurt
There's
now.
one in particular that is either very hopeful or very
Look at that, just like, good morning. He's so sad here. Good morning. What's good about it? And he's just got his head down because there's nothing good about it. He cannot find anything in life to cling to, but he still does. Good morning, USA. Good morning, Vietnam.
very devastating depending on your perspective, where John says, "We can't do anything about it."
I feel like in that last clip that we saw where he's just like laying in bed, just, I don't know if he was crying or whatever he's doing. He was doing like the grimace shake in Fortnite. I wonder if he dreads going to bed because he knows he's going to wake up tomorrow. That's fucking brutal. That's fucking brutal.
The past, but we can do something about the future.
Yes, we can.
Before he just disappears.
Oh my God.
Garfield minus Garfield was not the first instance of
John does
people
need therapy. I
removing
need therapy
Garfield
after
from
seeing
the
this.
comic to produce this kind of effect, but it was what popularized the idea online that there may be something very wrong with John Arbuckle. And over time, other fan works began to explore this in similar ways. Realistic Garfield, for example, conveyed similar themes by just replacing Garfield with a realistic cat who could not talk, as did fan comics like Arbuckle, while animations like Meat Canyon's Lasagna brought the idea of John's fractured reality even further.
Shout out to Meat Canyon. They
Depicting
make
John
some
as a frightening, delusional lunatic
weird
who holds
stuff.
his terrified victims captive and forces them to play the part of Garfield and Odie as he warps back and forth between the John Arbuckle we know from the comics and something much, much darker.
What?
The reason all
What is
these
it?
pieces are
What's so much
important
darker?
is that they show
Oh, there's
not
a whole bunch
only
of them
that
down
there
there,
is
okay.
something kind of wrong with John Arbuckle, but also that is
What if he's schizophrenic? What if he is schizophrenic and Garfield and Odie and none of these people exist? He's in some padded cell somewhere having these mass hallucinations and just delusions. X-Fire, what's up, man? Welcome to the stream. Welcome.
something that even in
Okay.
the early days of Garfield's online fandom, people picked up on. But where things get even stranger is when we look at this through the lens of what John Arbuckle was originally meant to be. Remember earlier when I said that Norm Nat ended in 1975, Jim Davis then spent 3 years doing nothing, and Garfield started in 1978?
I dropped my Discord.
Well,
Shoot
that
me
was
the
a
Lingo
lie,
Discord.
but I framed it this way because for decades, that's what people thought was the truth. Listen to any interview in which Jim Davis speaks about the origins of Garfield, and he'll wheel out the same anecdote about the failure of Norm Nat because insects are not appealing characters.
Sure.
And how that realization
beneath
led
us.
to him looking
Cats
at
are above us.
dog-centric
Everybody
comics
knows
like
that.
Peanuts and Marmaduke and saying to himself, what if I can create a similar character but for people who like cats?
Mm-hmm.
And thus, Garfield was born. Except this version of events also ignores the existence of Heathcliff, another surly,
that's fair.
round, orange cat who predates Garfield by about 5 years. And this isn't relevant at all, but I just think it's funny. However,
It just goes
this
to
telling
show
is
that
a
there's nothing
lie,
new under the
or
sun,
at
and
least
if
not the
it
full
ain't broken,
truth.
don't
Because
fix
you
it. Just
see,
copy
in the
it.
period
Steal
between
other people's work.
1975 and 1978,
Shout out
there
to Man in
was
Cave by
a
Internet
third
Historian.
comic, one that was only discovered in 2019 by intrepid Garfield historian
Mm-hmm.
Quentin Reviews, and this comic was simply titled John. There are two very strange things about John. The first being how closely it resembles Garfield. Everything from jokes to entire layouts are repeated across the two series, the only difference being that the main character here is John. Davis has spoken a lot about how John Arbuckle is an analog for him. Both grew up on a farm, both live in Muncie, Indiana, and both are cartoonists. In fact, Davis originally wanted to use the character of John as a way to voice his frustration with the comic strip industry. Which, if you look at where Davis was in his life when he first started writing this character,
I wonder if he was in a dark place himself.
John started just 2 weeks after the failure of Norm Nat, and you can feel that frustration in these early comics. In one instance, John even turning to the camera and saying how he thinks the content of this comic will land him in trouble with parents groups. And while Garfield still featured heavily,
because it's
there
edgy.
were strips where he just didn't appear at all, with scenarios more focused on observational humor derived from the perspective of a single man. But it wasn't long into the run when that started to change, with jokes more and more centering around Garfield and not John. The final strip of John being published on August 8th.
John's losing his way in the world.
The strip returning a
Garfield's
week later,
taking over.
but now named Garfield. And within a year, Garfield would be syndicated on a national level.
Maybe
becoming
this
the
is
newer
like a
version
representation of
comic
his
we
mental
are
health. He is
all
actually
now
healing.
familiar with. The second thing I find so strange
Coming out of a
about
dark
John
place.
is that while Jim Davis is often happy to laugh about the failure of Norm Nat, he barely ever speaks about John, and when he does, he only talks about it in the vaguest of terms, as if it was an idea in his sketchbook as opposed to an actual published comic. And I can't help but wonder if there's something to
It's got to
that.
be. He's got to
If
be
the
hiding
idea
his
of a
frustration
comic
and
that was
pain and
meant to be
anger
his own perspective,
inside
his
of
own
that
outlet on
inside of
life,
that
was a
comic
failure,
strip.
overtaken by a
Oh shit, we're up to 6 people.
fictional
Welcome,
character.
guys. Welcome to the stream.
Even stranger, as Garfield went on, the similarities between
Full of
Jim
nuts. Yeah,
Davis
I can
and
see
John
that. I
Arbuckle
can see that.
began
It definitely
to
looks like it's
disappear.
full of like
John's
nuts,
job
like a
as
squirrel.
cartoonist practically vanishing as he devolves into the pathetic shell of a man we now know. And I'm not saying here that I think Jim Davis has some deep-rooted trauma that is manifesting in his daily newspaper comic.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Genuinely do not think that. But I do think that this perspective adds a lot to this strange meta-narrative of a man overtaken.
Here's the thing, though. Oftentimes, we express our pain through the form of art, right? That's what humans do, whether it's music or actual physical media like paintings or drawings. A lot of times people express their pain that they're feeling through the medium of art. So why would it be far-fetched to believe that's what's going on in this situation as well?
By his own creation, abandoning the character he once embodied, and that character now being trapped in a life of existential suffering. And here's the thing. If I was the only person who saw this, then there wouldn't be a story here. But I'm not. Let's go back to those last 5 minutes of Lasagna Cat. Lasagna Cat ended 2 years before the discovery of John, but even then, what John adds to Lasagna Cat is kind of chilling.
What do you do with
Like
trauma?
in that
Give it to
final
a character
scene
that
when
isn't
second
even
John
yours in an
ages,
alternative
he
world
begins to
character.
bear
Oh,
a
hell no.
striking
They get no
resemblance
choice. They have to take it.
Jim
They have to take it.
Davis, the person we now know John was originally meant to be. This new strange combination of Jim Davis and John Arbuckle, lost and clinging to the husk of a cat he should have let go of a long time ago.
Okay, it's a mummified cat.
Before he comes face to face with a version of Garfield that's become independent from him and is now strange and frightening. Before Davis,
It's a magical
crumbles
shaman
to
cat.
earth, outlived by the very thing he created, which is immediately followed by the bathroom scene. And what's interesting,
Yeah, I don't wanna
here
relive
is
that
if we
scene again. That
translate
was
the
kinda
girl's
rough.
monologue from Polish, it reads, "This child isn't mine. This child is from the darkness.
Oh,
I've
okay.
given
Yeah.
birth to humanity's curse. My soul will be swallowed and vomited and swallowed again forever.
I think she
Sick
gave birth
joke.
to the
No
Antichrist.
one is laughing. My blood will remain. Death isn't the end. I am in hell. This is hell." And while I can't show it on screen,
Oh,
in that final
wow.
shot, the baby is shown wearing a blue shirt identical to John Arbuckle's. For pieces of art like this, I think there is a lot
Like,
of
I'm holding my
different
breath. I
interpretations
can't,
that you
I
can make.
don't have
But
the
for me
words
personally,
to
when Lasagna Cat is taken
describe
in
that.
totality,
That was
it
rough.
becomes
That was
this
real rough.
bizarre statement on what happens when the things you create become more powerful than you. How Garfield has become this semi-immortal entity, evolving past both John Arbuckle and Jim Davis.
It's like he created
I mean
an
this
idol for people to
literally.
worship.
Garfield is no longer even created by just Jim Davis. He has an entire team of people working under him who have become so adept at creating Garfield, their work is now indistinguishable from his. And Davis has even spoken about selecting a replacement.
It's cool. Like, he started
so
a
that
business. He gave
Garfield
people
can continue
jobs,
long
a way to
after he's
provide
gone.
for their family.
But
That's
here's
an
the
awesome
thing.
thing to be able to do.
It's not just Jim Davis's reality that Garfield has had this strange effect on. It's also ours. That might sound weird. I mean, how relevant could Garfield actually be in the modern era? Well, if I was to ask you which character out of Superman, Goku, and Garfield was the most syndicated, which would you pick?
It's got to be
And if you
Garfield,
pick-
just because he's had such a long shelf life, so to speak. He's kind of everywhere, and like, he's been in the newspaper forever. I don't feel that it would be Goku in the Western media. Where's the Discord link? Oh shoot! Let me invite you to my Discord. Where is my Discord? Why can't I'm blind? Blind is all can be. I don't know. Oh, Scan. Scan is the fucking man. Look at you go, Scan. Look at you go. But yeah, like where I was saying, Goku isn't like well known outside of anime culture, right? Like, people don't know Goku like they know Superman, because I mean, while we grew up on Dragon Ball Z on Toonami, it's still like a Eastern thing. It's a Japanese. So I can see why Garfield would beat out these two. However, in a power scaling competition, I know everybody thinks that Superman wins, but I'm sorry, Goku would give him those hands.
Any answer other than Garfield? Well, that was a strange choice given the subject of this video, but yeah, it is Garfield. After multiple decades in thousands of worldwide newspapers, Garfield has an estimated audience in the hundreds of millions. The New York Times had to change how its trade bestseller list was categorized after 7 of its 10 slots were occupied by Garfield. And today, his merchandising sales are at an estimated $800 million to $1 billion, and that is a lot
of
to
merch.
sell in 40 years. Oh, wait, that's
Every
every
year?
year?
Oh my God.
That's every fucking year in products
Oh my
that
Lord.
twist Garfield into every conceivable form you can imagine. For example, Garfield soap, Garfield air fresheners,
Okay.
Garfield cushions.
Do you think Garfield
teapots,
air freshener
a poster with
smells like,
Garfield as a ninja, Garfield headphone holders,
lasagna?
Garfield thermostat, Garfield commemorative coin, Garfield digital alarm clock, Garfield's key hanger, Garfield piggy bank, Garfield Walkman, Garfield globe, Garfield ice skates, Garfield boxing gloves, how to insult your friends, Garfield book.
I need that. What are you looking at, Squidface? I need this book.
Garfield web browser, Garfield amusement park ride, Garfield's personal massager, a Garfield mug, another Garfield mug, a much dumber Garfield mug, a Garfield mug that is even dumber than the first dumb Garfield mug, existential Garfield, another existential Garfield, slightly too many Irish stereotype Garfield, Garfield
Okay.
waistcoat, Unwell Garfield, Garfield gun, Satan Garfield,
Red Hot Lover,
Slime
what?
Garfield, Child Garfield, Illegal Garfield, another fucking Garfield mug. I don't know what this is. Table Garfield, yet another Table Garfield. Garfield prison tray, Sex Garfield, far too large Garfield.
That is a good
Nightmare
question.
Garfield,
Why isn't
this
Garfield
horrifying
in
bed
Fortnite?
sheet, the deeply cursed Garfield eats. What is this? Why? This
Dude, that
Garfield
chair would be
jigsaw,
sick.
which for some reason
A
I can't
Garfield
quite
chair?
pin down, puts the fear of God in me. In the mid-80s, a small coastal French village began to suffer an unusual phenomenon when plastic Garfield phones began washing up on shore. No one knew where they came from or why this was happening,
Dude, that is-
but it continued.
Plastic Garfield phones washing up on shore has to be a similar, like a similar situation as the plague of locusts from the Bible, like when the Pharaoh refused to let the Israelites go. So I'd imagine that's what it is. It's like a sign of the end times, you know, the apocalypse that is to be known as the Garfocalypse.
For 3 decades, a mystery that was only solved in 2019 when the mysterious phones were traced back to a lost shipping container. We have so saturated this planet with Garfield merchandise that even the Earth herself has begun to reject it. But if that's the case, why don't we notice Garfield more? Why don't we see him everywhere in
point.
every day? And the answer is because they don't want us to. In the early 1980s, a production accident led to a Garfield plush with suction cups attached to
When's
his
the last
hands
time you
and
guys seen
feet.
anything
Pause Inc.,
Garfield
the
related?
holding company for Garfield didn't expect what was a botched product to sell well, which is why it was such a shock when
That
the
is-
toy
that
was
is a good-
so
good
popular.
defense,
It led to
legal
a
defense.
wave of car break-ins where radios and purses were left behind and only the plush was stolen. Sales climbing to a staggering $50 million. And what did Jim Davis and Pause Inc. do? They pulled all plush dolls off the shelves for 5 years.
Why?
They didn't
Why'd you do that?
Garfield to be a fad. They wanted to silently inject him into every part of our daily lives, where he could hide in plain sight, silently growing into one of the most dominant fictional characters on the planet. And here's the thing, they succeeded. What I'm about to tell you is
Are
no
they like the
joke.
McDonald's
This
of
is
the
not some
like the
Space
cat
Jam
world?
2-esque hijinks. This all happened over the course of making this video. An experience I call the Garfield phenomenon. It began in small ways. At first, I'd be watching a TV show and, oh, hey, there was Garfield.
Anything but the jar.
I look at Instagram and, my friends were posting about Garfield and, oh, a text.
Dude, I couldn't tell you the last time I saw
I
anything
guess
Garfield
Chris
related.
Pratt is playing Garfield in the new Garfield movie. That's strange timing. Wait, why is Toby Fox talking about Garfield and sexy goth Garfield began?
Look, I'm not saying I'm a furry, but like, hear me out. Hear me out. Hear me out. That's the dream, right? Goth cat girls, right? Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And trending on Twitter, I began to feel slightly.
Well, I might need this. So we're gonna look up goth field later. Good to know.
uneasy, so maybe I'll just try and relax and
Not that I would do
look
that.
at
I
some
would do
gaming
that.
news and
I just,
oh, hey,
just so we know
I guess
where not to
Garfield's
go.
the new character
Yeah,
in that
yeah, research
Smash
purposes, of
Nickelodeon
course.
fighting game. Isn't that grand? I'd been watching ReZero, which I did not like very much, and someone told me that Garfield appears in the 2nd season, which just can't be true. And what the fuck? A friend
No,
sent
that's a
me
tiger.
picture
That's a
of
tiger.
a mural in an old house, and there was Garfield staring at me with what I can only describe as some kind of all-knowing contempt. I was now doing whatever I could not to think about Garfield, and I agreed to watch the first episode of the new Dexter with my partner, and
Wow, yeah, I can only imagine. Brian wants to call him Garfield.
What?
What the fuck? What the fuck did he just say?
everywhere I looked, I saw Garfield. But why? Why was this happening now? Well, that answer would come to me
That's just an orange
And it
sweater.
did
That's just
so.
an orange car.
in the form of a phone call.
I wonder if Garfield orange is like a trademark
Hello?
thing.
Hi, son.
Oh, hey, ma'am. How's it going?
John, I know you're working on your video of Garfield at the moment, so
Okay.
guess what? I found the picture of you with your Garfield.
Oh, ma'am. I don't think that was me. I was never actually that into Garfield.
Oh my god. He had a stuffy. He had a Garfield stuffy.
So, earlier in this video, when I
Now I'm
said
thinking, have I ever
that
had any
I was
Garfield
never
merchandise?
into Garfield, that was true. I don't remember this. I don't remember
It's photoshopped.
owning
It's photoshopped.
this
It's
massive
not real.
Garfield doll.
It's not real.
But that is me, and that is my mom,
Fake.
and this
Fake news.
happened. I just don't remember. And this is when it started to click.
You actually have a comic of Garfield?
That when you look for Garfield, you begin to find him everywhere. Even in the past.
I was trying to make sure you wasn't behind me.
This is the Garfield phenomenon.
Is that Mike Pence?
Garfield is all around us, and he always has been.
It is Mike Pence.
We just never noticed. But my eyes are open.
Okay. I got scared.
Now,
Well, there might have been something there when I read look behind you in chat.
if an
Just wanted to make
alien
sure.
race
Again,
dug through a ruined
you never know
Earth,
who might sneak up on you.
they would think we worshipped Garfield, and they would be right.
Think about it. The
These
Egyptians
are the
worshipped
three
cats,
keys
right?
in unlocking what Garfield has become on the
Maybe
internet.
we've just worshipped cats our whole
A
life.
daily newspaper comic strip designed to be as simple and consumable as possible, but because of this becomes unintentionally malleable and recreatable, spreading edits of it online.
Stupid
one of
cat?
which
No,
unknowingly
not anymore.
touches
Garfield
of a
is God.
bizarre meta-narrative of a man being overtaken by his own creation. That creation, in time becoming an entity unto itself, one that has laid just outside the perception of man for 40 years.
I want to take a second to actually think about something else. Yes, Garfield is not that funny. Everybody knows this. Like, the cartoon was okay. But what it's showing is that consistency is the key. Not giving up. Just keep going, and you're going to have a legacy left behind. A legacy of an orange cat who transcends time and reality and bends the fabric of space at its will. You know, that's exactly what Garfield is. That's what this cat is. That's
And will remain there for
What's up,
infinitely
Tonky? What's up,
more,
brother? Welcome to the
transcending
stream.
Humanity
Sorry, we're going a
itself.
little bit crazy
This is the
watching
bizarre
Garfield.
reality of Garfield.
Hold on. Tonk. Do you remember Garfield from a kid? Did you ever watch the or see the comic strips and all that stuff? Do you remember Garfield? You have to. Like, everybody knows him. The only some people would need like you is a body pillow of a goth cat girl that hates Mondays. Oh my god. Oh yeah, that's. I'm gonna buy me a Gothfield body pillow. My wife would love that. Lasagna or whatever it is. When's the last time you saw something Garfield related? I can't remember the last time I've seen it. And I have a feeling this is going to be like, you don't notice the car, other cars around until you buy the car, and then you notice them everywhere because you're part of the club that owns it. I think that's what this is. And tomorrow when I go into a grocery store or something, I'm just going to fucking see Garfield everywhere. Garfield's going to be fucking coming out of like every orifice of my body. That sounded terrible. I don't know why I said that, but I just feel like that's what's going to happen. I'm going to go to bed and dream about this orange cat and like morphing into this cat like I'm a Power Ranger. Oh God, don't clip it. Dear God, Lord, please don't. Yeah, I guess. I don't care. Oh man, I need to ask my wife when the last time she saw something Garfield was.
And now that we understand it, we may enter the world of I'm Sorry, John. On October 22nd, 2013,
I'm Sorry, John?
A comic was uploaded to the internet that showed John Arbuckle awaking late one night.
Okay.
But something is wrong. Something is very wrong. His room is bathed in an eerie orange glow.
Yes. Yeah,
A strange
absolutely.
material
Or
covering
cat
his
coming on me.
walls,
I'm not sure
his
which one.
furniture, and his entire home. He goes downstairs to try and discover the source of this problem, and upon entering the kitchen, he sees Garfield, his cat's strange, swollen
Thanks,
head,
Ken. I appreciate it.
bizarrely
That's gonna go down in
embedded
infamy
in the wall,
for sure.
His skin spreading outward, covering every surface of his home.
Oh, look, he's the Necronomicat.
So hungry.
As John realizes with horror, his entire home with him in it have been ingested by Garfield.
I'm sorry, John.
This was the beginning, and in the years to follow, more and more strange and frightening depictions of Garfield would begin to appear on the internet. Comics that looked normal at first, only to take disturbing turns, with Garfield often portrayed as something alien and unknowable.
Okay.
One of the
His
most
face is
popular
melting
of
into,
which
like, string
was
cheese.
2017's Gramfell, a
Gramfell,
darkly humorous webcomic whose early pages were focused on John's depression, met by an uncaring, nihilistic Gramfell. But as the comic continued, Gramfell began to reveal to
we
John not
alive?
only the inherent
are we
unhappiness of
dead?
life,
Oh,
but
is
the
this like Schrodinger's
futility
cat?
of his
Okay.
existence as a character trapped in a webcomic, breaking John down to his core components and trapping him in strange and surreal realities over and over. At one point, even transforming the very webcomic of Gramfell itself into a different series called Jan and Gram, in which John gets to live out the cute and peaceful life he's always wanted before John is ripped from his serene dream and in the final page is forced to acknowledge that he is alone. And he always will be.
Life
what I
is
find
alone
so
is life.
fascinating about
Okay.
Gramfell
You're
is
born
it's
alone,
that
you
same
die alone.
dynamic of John and Garfield, just brought to a cosmically nihilistic extreme. This was the core concept of what would inform everything. that was
Nihilism's
to
great.
come. But
Gotta love
notably, Gramfell never felt truly frightening or disturbing because of the simple pastel cuteness of its aesthetic. And if the horror of Garfield on the internet was going to truly solidify, it needed an aesthetic, and in the following year, it would get it. In 2018, an image would be uploaded to Instagram from horror artist Will Burke, one that depicted a horrifyingly bloated Garfield clutching.
I feel like
a
that's what
tiny
I look like in the
frightened
morning
John
without
with the
my makeup
text,
on.
John, I require lasagna.
Something about this image resonated with people, and it became wildly popular online, becoming the first in a series of 5 illustrations, each one depicting Garfield as a grotesque,
That does kinda look like
swollen
LJ.
monstrosity. His form
Don't tell him I said
between
that.
heaving mounds of flesh and
Oh, this is
sharp
Garfield, okay.
insect-like appendages. As he hunted John through his
Like, this is
home.
what you would
And
see
while
if you
the
fell
sheer
into the back
horror
rows.
of seeing Garfield twisted into such nightmarish forms were a huge part of the power of these images, critically, they also captured the kind of
cat
hopelessness of
centipede?
the character of
Okay.
John Arbuckle, but channeled it into pure horror. One illustration showing John terrified and clutching a shotgun as a grotesque centipede-like Garfield emerges through the door behind him, with text that reads,
Bullets don't work, John.
the final image of this series depicting a
These silver bullets
gargantuan Garfield now towering over a helpless, terrified John as he whispers.
Like, what do you do at this point? If you're in John's position, what do you do? Lasagna bullets might work. That's a good idea. Lasagna bullets. Distraction, right? Maybe nuclear lasagna. But like, what do you do? Like, you just give up, right? Because there's no way that you can win. No way. This fucking creature. I just it's grotesque. I don't even know. I would have cried. I would have cried just thinking about it. Like, I don't think Chuck Norris would be able to do anything. I don't know, because like Chuck Norris nearly isn't as popular as Garfield. So clearly Garfield has like this otherworldly power that we don't know existed. Maybe this is what people thought when like H.P. Lovecraft was like making Cthulhu and shit. Maybe this is what Satan really looks like. This right here is who Jesus fought. This is what Jesus fought.
Whispers.
The world is going
Hello Kitty
to
wasn't that
end,
bad. I like Hello
John.
Kitty.
These images would rampage across the internet, being posted, reposted, and upvoted tens of thousands of times, and would become the blueprint for everything Garfield would become online.
I think it's so
As
much
different
creepier
artists
in
began
black
to create
and white,
their
to be
own
honest.
interpretations of Burke's work,
Kind of looks like
such as
Naruto.
animator Lumpy Touch, who took Burke's illustrations and reimagined them through
like
stunning and
box form or
horrifying pixel
cat
art
form, whatever.
animations, not only giving these still images a new horrifying dimension through movements, but also reframing them as a 2D survival horror video game. Lumpy Touch taking this concept
Capitalizing
even further
on,
later on,
the popularity
with
of it. I
both
like
a
it.
first-person exploration recreation of the original I'm Sorry John comic, as well as creating a tutorial for his own fake Garfield survival horror game in which the player is hunted by one of 13 Gorefields, all based on the different zodiac signs. And what I really love about this is you can see that kind of existential horror introduced by Gramfell, as well as the more grotesque body horror introduced by Burke, now being spliced with other mediums and genres of horror. And you could see this continue to evolve in other illustrations like those of artist Omega Black, who took the idea of
So is Garfield
horror
evil,
and
or is he
introduced
benevolent?
a cosmic eldritch feel, like this image in which Garfield states,
I no longer require eyes, John.
which I am pretty sure is a reference to the 1997 film Event Horizon, a sci-fi horror in which a group of astronauts board a lost starship that has returned from hell, featuring the infamous line,
Where we're going, we won't need eyes to see.
Omega
Oh my
Black's other
God.
illustrations only
Someone's
expanding
car
on this
is loud as shit
Lovecraftian
outside.
style of Garfield horror, with a grotesque centipede like Garfield stating,
Heaven is a void of light, John.
or John being held captive by cloaked Odies
20 minutes.
before an impossibly massive multi-armed Garfield booms.
I'm eternal, John.
Each new
see,
piece of Garfield fauna
Garfield is the primordial waters that spring forth life. Everything from existence comes from Garfield. We just didn't know. I have this theory that nothing is truly invented. Everything is rediscovered. So now we are just rediscovering that Garfield is the key to eternal life and salvation, yet is also the key to eternal damnation. So I'll bow before our Lord and Savior Garfield. Hopefully I don't die for that.
art added to this idea of Garfield as a cosmic, horrifying being, sometimes referred to as Creepy Garfield or Gorefield. And this is what led to October 8th,
It did remind me of Choo Choo Charles.
2018, and the creation of the subreddit r/I'm sorry.
Did he say
John.
or slash?
There's nearly a cult-like feel to I'm Sorry, John. Its title plaque reading, Garfield has abandoned his limited form and he is beautiful. Surrender yourself to him and be saved. This is a community of nearly 800,000 people dedicated to bringing to life this new version of Garfield
John, I need
the
more
internet
lasagna.
has created, as well as his infinite torment.
The thing is, There was plenty of lasagna left in that refrigerator. He did not eat it very efficiently. It's kind of like the fact that you have a cat and they eat out the center of the bowl and they think the food's gone until you shake up the bowl and there it is again. That's kind of like what he was doing with that lasagna. AU stands for alternative universe. So if I use that term, remember it means that. Okay, isn't AU also like the chemical symbol for gold?
Of John Arbuckle. And maybe, like I did, you're thinking, no, Garfield's not evil. He's not trying to
Garfield
hurt
Kronos.
John. It's not like that mystery number 2 category of Garfield joke is in fact humor based off Garfield's torment of John. But that's right, at 18.8%, nearly 1 in 5 Garfield jokes center around Garfield causing John mental anguish.
Satan.
And it's not just that. Another variable I measured for was the amount of times Garfield showed empathy towards John or tried to comfort his suffering in any way. And across nearly 1,000 comics, that number was 0. So, in the same way Garfield minus Garfield reveals something real, if unintentional, about Garfield, the same is true in I'm Sorry, John. Garfield has always been about a person trapped with a cold, nihilistic being that torments him, and it's been that way for 40 years. And all that I'm sorry John does is bring that concept to a horrifying extreme. This is the reason I think so many pieces on I'm Sorry, John have this odd kind of power to them.
John in
Their
tears.
horror is rooted in being trapped with something awful and inescapable. But what's really fascinating about the horror of I'm Sorry, John is how different artists have approached this idea in different ways.
Yeah.
I like categorizing things, so I've identified what I think are 3 basic kinds of horror on I'm Sorry, John. The first being physical Garfield horror. These are pieces that twist Garfield into strange and frightening creatures, sometimes into amalgamations of unsettling
that's
body
kind of
horror, but more often swelling Garfield to such nightmarish
kind of
proportions
succubus-y
that
like,
there is
isn't it?
no chance of John ever defeating, escaping, or even surviving these grotesque beasts Garfield has become. And what's interesting here is how many of these pieces evoke or even directly reference the FromSoft games Dark Souls and Bloodborne, which themselves create a lot of their horror and emotion by forcing you into battles with these massive and horrifying creatures that feel impossible to overcome. It's that kind of physical hopelessness that these pieces create. And just like those games, the more extreme examples of this kind of Garfield horror carry a cosmic, nearly Lovecraftian feel, as Garfield is now so large, so impossible, that he begins to feel like some kind of terrible deity, a being of such immense power and scale that it throws into chaos our own sense of humanity's place in the universe, whether we really are the dominant species we've always assumed, or just dust in the wake of something much greater. I just read that line and I can't believe we're talking about fucking Garfield. The second type of Garfield horror is more intimate and psychological. Here, it's less that Garfield is a physical threat as much as it is the subtle, insidious damage he's doing to John's mental state. Sometimes in the form of an awful,
he knows what he's doing. He's gaslighting John the whole time.
Follows John and goads him, driving him to do terrible things, but sometimes as a delusional presence in John's own mind.
Oh my God.
A manifestation of his internal struggles, be they depression, addiction, or worse, in a way that feels similar to your Shinings, your Silent Hills, or reading your own comment section. These pieces are much
don't ever read the comment
section.
section.
Awesome about
Never.
them is how they take that bleakness that's always been a part of John's character and express it through Garfield. There is a third type of Garfield horror, and these are my personal favorite. Posts that focus on a more existential form of terror. The simplest examples of this are pieces that trap John in these impossible and infinite liminal spaces where there is no escape and he will forever be haunted by Garfield. But other scenarios are more elaborate, like when
That
even
last one was
death
a mindfuck.
itself can't release John from Garfield's grasp, showing Garfield as this immortal, unending being who will always return to plague John, or even the opposite, like in this one comic where John takes his own life to escape Garfield, only to be brought back to life by him.
Oh my
so his
gosh.
suffering can continue. Other pieces are
That would be
stranger
terrible.
and even more abstract, like showing Garfield as these grotesque physical parasites that have attached themselves to John and are feeding off him, while he is trapped in these strange, unending dream worlds. And I think where this particular kind of horror
Kinda
gets
looks like
really
Patrick
powerful
from
is when it's
SpongeBob.
combined with the more psychological type of Garfield horror we just talked about, like Lumpy Touch's Relax John, which we mentioned earlier.
Lumpy
And what I
Touches,
think is
okay.
so great about this animation is it shows John returning home late one night at his most broken, his life now destroyed, having lost his job,
Okay, he did get
Liz,
fired.
and
Okay.
even Odie. And it's at
No,
this
not Odie.
point when he's at his absolute lowest that he is most vulnerable to a being like Garfield, who offers John an escape from his miserable existence in the form of comfort, but in reality drags him into a frightening nightmare. And I love this so much because it is such a fantastic example of what Garfield has become on the internet. Garfield is despair. He's the part of John that makes him feel weak and insignificant, who pulls him down and traps him in realities dark and frightening. That is the core horror.
What if this whole time, instead of this, like this idea that Garfield is torturing John, he is actually just showing John tough love in order to toughen John up for the role of the Messiah that John must play? What if it's just it's not what we think it is?
Horror of Garfield and I'm Sorry, John. It's interesting to note that this concept has only continued to evolve online in sub-communities like You're Welcome,
Dude, I'm
John,
not
which
sleeping
is
tonight
a
either.
more
Look at those baby birds. They're so cute.
wholesome, if still very disturbing relationship between John and a cosmically nightmarish Garfield, as well as I'm Really Sorry, John, which I cannot even talk about if this video has any hope of staying monetized. Hey,
Fair.
by the way,
Please don't talk about it.
This video is nearly definitely going to be demonetized.
Yeah, 100%.
So I
It
have
definitely
a
is.
Patreon. There's one tier. It's $1. So yeah.
Mhm.
But hey, look, either way, I appreciate you watching. You can even see this very defined
Cookie
kind
Monster,
of Garfield
okay.
horror being transplanted
Dwight and
onto
Jim,
other fictional
interesting.
series with I'm Sorry John's occasional
some Morge
non-Garfield
Sampson.
weekends. And while I
don't know what that
really
is.
love these pieces,
I don't know what that is.
how do I look?
With your eyes, Bert.
With your eyes, Bert.
It's good. That's a good one.
Your
That's a really
eyes.
good one.
God, that's so good. I think it's interesting how, at least to me, they
Is
never
that
quite
Peppa
carry
Pig?
the same level of impact or meaning as those based on Garfield. Not only because of how deeply rooted the horror of I'm Sorry, John is in the very core of Garfield, but also in how, when taken with everything else we've talked about today, these pieces begin to transform
returns to
what
lasagna.
these characters are.
Everything comes back
and
to
in
pasta.
particular,
Okay.
John.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Mario from SMG4 and Garfield are the same people. They're the same person. It all comes back to pasta. I get it now. I get it.
Arbuckle. When I started this video, all John was this schlubby dude. But over time, that started to change. I watched him go from this character with a very defined purpose and reason for existing to someone who loses that purpose and becomes to the world around them a pathetic joke. And it's like that experience causes this deep emptiness to well up inside them, a despair that makes life feel meaningless and impossible in a way that the Garfield comic can barely contain.
Yeah.
Till one day, that despair begins to manifest
Seeps
as
through other
Garfield.
mediums.
An entity that traps John in this deep and horrifying delusion, warping every part of his reality.
Okay.
This entity, with each passing day, growing stronger and more frightening.
I can see that. Like,
as
Garfield's
John
always bullied
falls
John.
deeper into despair. And when I think of this late stage of John's existence, there's one artist in particular that comes to mind. Part of what makes Rajam's work so powerful and
I don't know if that many
frightening
artists.
is how intimately
Picasso,
they seem
Rembrandt,
to understand each
Michelangelo,
particular kind of
Da Vinci.
Garfield horror. Some pieces show Garfield as these massive, monstrous beasts whose mere existence conveys this horrifying physical futility. Others show Garfield as this gargantuan and grotesque parasite, as this insidious force that's been with John since the moment he was born, and for years has manipulated and contorted every part of his life, draining John.
Dude, this is a fucked up
until
video.
Finally, Garfield has grown so powerful that he's now more a god than anything else. So infinite, cosmic, and terrifying that he's become John's entire reality. And John, now just a speck of dust, hopeless and terrified in the face of this thing that he created till the end of time. And I think there's something
I never
really
thought about it this
powerful
way, but I
about
feel
these
like this is
movies.
accurate, though.
The beautiful thing about horror is it lets us externalize the things that haunt us. And when I look at the work of Omega Black or Lumpy Touch or Rajam, what I see is a person struggling. Someone whose existence stopped making sense a long time ago and who's just trapped in this horrifying
Existential hell.
distortion of what their life should be. And I think there's something very human about that. When I think back to the very worst period,
Kind of looks like
what
the actor
comes
from
to
Don't
me
Call Saul.
is this feeling of being trapped in my own mind, that there is something in me that is distorting how I see the world and the people around me and everything, and it's horrible. It's a nightmare. And I think the hardest part of it is the feeling that it's never going to end, that the way you feel in those moments is how you will feel for the rest of your life. And if you've ever struggled mentally or emotionally,
Yeah.
you know that fear.
Yeah. Been there.
And it is that fear that I've never seen visualized better than in fucking Garfield fan art. We all want to be Garfield, but we all are
John
Arbuckle.
Yeah, wow.
And
Wow, I
the
never
thing is,
thought I would catch
those
this many
bad
feelings
times,
from a Garfield video.
They do never last. They do end. And I think that's
Such a
why I
good
find
freaking
this
video,
final
man.
piece so hopeful. The piece is done in Rajam's traditional pen and ink style, but with a subtlety that makes it feel nearly carved from stone. And it shows a demonic Garfield lying, defeated and broken, a sandaled foot pinning him to the ground, which belongs
To John?
to an angelic John Arbuckle.
Oh, because John hasn't
Tears
given up yet.
rolling down his face, his wings raised in this just glorious arc. And it's like, after everything we've watched John go through, after all the loneliness, the depression, the complete loss of his identity, leading to the dissolution of his reality into this infinite, abject nightmare, after all that, somehow he's made it to this moment.
He's transcended, right? So the idea that our weaknesses are a weakness is it's false. It's false. Our weaknesses are an opportunity to overcome them. They are our strength hidden away. This is exactly what that signifies. Garfield was an obstacle to John that now he is overcome. He has transcended mere mortal to the status of something else. If you would consider Garfield a god, John is more than that. And I don't know how to contextualize that as a human because I can't perceive something beyond the perceivable. But John has become that throughout this, the apotheosis of John Arbuckle.
From the shit that haunts him, and it's fucking beautiful. And maybe this won't last. Maybe there's still darker times ahead.
Okay.
But it doesn't matter. Because in this moment, he's okay. John's okay. And look, I get it. I get that having this strong an emotional reaction to what is most certainly a Garfield shitpost is ridiculous. But goddamn,
this guy's
that is
damn
what
good
I do
storyteller.
here. I take my hope where I can get it.
Okay.
The title of this piece being The Forgiveness of John. Oh, I put the costume back on because I was worried that this part might be too heavy without it.
Sure.
And also I paid a lot of money for it.
Fair,
What makes the
fair.
Forgiveness
Get the
of
use
John
out of it.
so
Get the use out of
powerful
it.
To me is that in isolation, it is an amazing piece of art and a real technical achievement.
Stream lagged? That's not
But
good.
when taken with everything else we've spoken about this video,
Is everything okay? Hello?
it becomes the concluding chapter of a gigantic meta-narrative that is formed around John Arbuckle. And again, if I was the only person who saw that, there wouldn't be a story here. The Forgiveness of John being the third most popular post on r/I'm sorry John of all time, as well as adorning its front page. And I think it's awesome that so many people's individual works come together to pull such an incredible story out of something as simple as a daily comic strip about a cat who likes lasagna. This is what I love about fandoms.
What a roller coaster ride this video's been. Oh my god.
Stories start to emerge that are distorted and honest and amazing. And whatever else you want to say about the nightmare of the modern day internet and social media, I'm glad that those stories have a place to exist. I think that's pretty cool.
I have no words.
Friends, thank you for joining me today, and I really hope you...
That was amazing. 377,000 upvotes. Yeah. Another one. Holy crap. That was amazing. I just, my mind's blown. I was on such a roller coaster of emotions the whole time. I really don't know how to feel. Like, I felt defeated. And then I felt not defeated. And then I got kicked lower. And then at the end, John rising above the adversity, just overcoming his demon, fighting his own demon and winning. Wow, that was good.